How does it feel for you knowing that all these years after your father passed away, he's still able to pull an audience?
Well, I was thinking, being here at the Palladium, the first time I saw a program here was 42 years ago. And this is probably the most famous name of all the theaters in London. There are many wonderful theaters, but this one I think is the most famous.
I should ask you, have you ever performed here?
No, sir, I have not. I played at the Royal Albert Hall when I conducted the orchestra, but I have never played in the Palladium.
Now, you're renowned as a conductor and your work goes before you. Your CDs have sold big time around the world. Everybody knows Frank Sinatra and they know your father. Does it bother you the fact that the reason that most people are here speaking to you today is because of your father, and had you not had that connection, they probably wouldn't want to talk to you?
You're probably right that far, but no, it doesn't bother me. I did come here for that reason. I must correct you, though, regrettably, my records have not sold big around the world. I'm not a big record seller. But no, it doesn't bother me per se. That's what I'm here for. But you're quite correct. I'm sure that none of the media people or writers would wish to have it to speak to me if I was not Frank Sinatra's son.
What is your life like now? Do you still live every day thinking about your father and wrapped up in his music, or have you managed to somehow distance yourself from that and remember him as just your dad?
I never lived at any time wrapped up thinking of him every day. Life in reality doesn't permit that. In my case, I had my own life to lead, which like all others has its ups and downs. As far as the music goes, because I'm in that business myself, I am constantly trying to bring about the best music I can. And I believe that that's where I run parallel to Frank Sinatra, because he would not do music that he thought was inferior. And I believe the same way.
I'm such a fan of live music, and what I adore is that roar of the orchestra. And when you're stood listening to an orchestra like the Royal Philharmonic that I heard at the Royal Albert Hall only a week ago, and you hear that sound, there's nothing else quite like it, yet we don't get to hear it much anymore, because A, it's too expensive to put those type of shows on, and it's not really done in many venues.
You are echoing my belief completely. It is not really done anymore. I wonder what the next generation of children beyond this generation, I mean, will they ever hear a symphony orchestra except on some recording that was made however many years ago? It's unfortunate when you consider that. You know, if you went to the Royal Albert Hall, which is one of the great acoustical chambers in the world, to hear a symphony play, that is an experience. One night, many years ago in the Royal Albert Hall, I heard them play the Planet Suite of Holst. I think it was the London Symphony that played. I think Andre Previn was conducting. That was an experience, and I wonder, just what you said, how many more days do we have to hear this live?
When I was watching the conductor a week ago, I looked at him and thought, what is he doing? And I was watching his arms, and he didn't really go with the beat, but somehow everything worked together.
That is something, right? Another thing that you said, sometimes there are video discs and tapes that of classic programs, you know, of different conductors playing different symphonies or conducting for a soloist, a concerto for violin or piano or something. Some of them I can follow. Others, I have no idea where one is in the measure. I have no idea where the downbeat is. When I was in music school learning to conduct, our teacher used to say there are those people who look like a scarecrow in a windstorm. And I've often felt that sometimes I see exactly what he meant. The idea, the objective of the conductor is to communicate with the musicians. And somebody said to me once years ago, try to learn to conduct with downbeats and cutoffs wherever you can, because when the musician in the orchestra is playing that music, they have to read the music. And in order to distract them, they have to look up to find out what the conductor's doing is counterproductive to the whole objective. Try to be as minimally intrusive conducting, as possible. Try to keep it simple. More is less. And you interfere with the concentration of the musicians in fewer episodes if you keep it minimalistic. Then I think that you can do that. You can be the matinee idol. You can be like Leonard Bernstein was and things like that.
Okay, we're going to play a lot of music by your father. I'm just such a big fan of his sound. It seemed to me so effortless, and there's so many tracks that kind of sum that up. What is your favorite track that you ever heard your father sing?
I cannot answer that question. I've been asked that a dozen times since I've been here. It's impossible. There are too many. There are happy songs, sad songs, jazz songs. It's just impossible to say. There are so many sides that were good ones.
Let me rephrase the question then. What song shall we play next?
Well, I don't know what type of mood you're trying to bring to your audience at this moment. Are you trying to bring a happy mood, a wistful mood, a reflective mood? Which?
What mood are you in?
Well, you're asking me questions that, by and large, are kind of philosophic. You know, musically, I'm a kind of a reflective mood just now.
I'd like to go back to the beginning now. What was your relationship like as a child with your father?
The last 7 years that he worked, beginning in 1988, we had really no relationship. While I was growing up, I was at school, and he was executing his career. He was making his movies, making his television, making his recordings, and that was a 30-hour-a-day job. My relationship with him came when I joined his company as his musical director when he was in his 70s and I was in my mid-40s.
So did you have a professional relationship as a father and son then?
Yes, we did, and it was a very nice one. And now that he's gone, these 8 years, those memories are much more dear to me than I ever imagined, even at the time that they would be one day.
You were certainly blessed and lucky to spend that time with him. I have to ask a question that I've always wanted to ask, and I've watched endless documentaries about your father. I've heard good and bad. Was your father a nice man?
As far as I'm concerned, he was. I admired him because of the fact that he was a person who believed in the principle of maintaining one's own character. The things he believed in, he believed in. The things he did not believe in, he stayed away from. He practiced those beliefs devoutly. And I always felt it hurt him many times. He was bruised many times by his non-compromising attitude. If I like someone or something, I am not going to just let that disappear because suddenly it is fashionable to let such a thing disappear. And I always admired him for that. There's the story during the war. The Archbishop of Canterbury asked the Prime Minister, Mr. Churchill, since you stand on the side of justice and civilization, why do you have so many enemies? And the story goes that the Prime Minister of England, Winston Churchill, turned and said, Your Grace, the man who has no enemies has no character. And my father did not mind the fact that his character on occasion would generate enemies. That's going to happen. If you have character, you're going to have enemies. I always felt that the reason why he afforded himself that luxury is because the friends outnumbered the enemies probably by 20 to 1.
His act seemed so specifically brilliant. He never seemed to falter on stage. I don't think I've seen any tape of him ever going wrong. He always kept his professionalism. Was he like that as a father? Did he expect you to behave yourself all the time? How forgiving was he as a father?
He faltered on stage many times. The trick is not to become such a pompous person on stage that faltering is going to upset the fabric of the program you're doing. The entire thing of his show was informality. His job was only to talk to the people by telling them stories through music. There were many falterings. There is no such thing as a perfect show. There is no such thing.
But what I meant was in terms of his professionalism, he never lost it.
That's correct. He never did lose his professionalism. When I was conducting for him after shows, we'd go over notes at night as to what we did, what mistakes we made, all of us. This is the mark of the professional. As far as his fathering goes, parenting in that sense, I never really thought about it. There are always pitfalls between parents and children. There's the old question, who can explain parents to children? But I really don't know what else to say about that.
How well did you know him? He was working so hard and his lifestyle was so well documented. There didn't seem much time for him to be a father. How regularly were you in contact with him?
Well, when I was a child, very seldom, because he was away at work all the time. And of course, then I got deeper and deeper into school, which then went on to the college after that. And we really saw each other very, very seldom, very seldom. But as the years went by, then I started my own career working, and that took me away then, so the two of us were away a lot. As I mentioned, it was only when I joined his company as musical director in the late 1980s that we really had time together.
Would you communicate over the telephone?
Oh, sure, but that's not time together. That's communication over the telephone.
How was he with your mother?
He was very nice with my mother. He always admired her, and I think that he recognized quite well the very good person that the mother of his children was, and is, even now.
Did he even have time for her?
Well, now that, I really was not privy to the adult relationship. The adults keep their private lives a little bit separate from children, especially young children. I really can't answer that question.